Okay, so today we're diving into a case that has really just captivated so many people for years now. The disappearance of Susan Powell. It all started back on December 6th, 2009 in West Valley City, Utah. Susan was a young mother and she just vanished, seemingly without a trace. She left behind a husband, Joshua, and their two sons, Charles and Braden.
Yeah, a lot of people have been really drawn to this case. For many reasons, I think.
Yeah. Now, on the surface, they seem like a pretty ordinary family. But as we dig deeper into all the source material that you've shared with us, well, you start to see that this case is anything but ordinary. We're going to uncover some really unsettling family dynamics, a very suspicious camping trip, and eventually just a horrific tragedy that honestly leaves us with more questions than answers. So to really understand all the complexities of this case, we need to kind of go back to the beginning. To Joshua Powell's childhood, his upbringing was, well, to put it mildly, troubled.
Yeah, his father, Stephen Powell, he had a history of abusive behavior, and he created a really chaotic and dysfunctional environment for his children. And, this kind of early trauma can have a lasting impact. It shapes a person's behavior, their relationships, in really profound ways.
Right. And, maybe we see some of those impacts in Joshua's early adult life, even in his first serious relationship with Catherine Everett. There were signs of controlling and possessive behavior. He tried to isolate her from her family, and he wanted to dictate all these different parts of her life. Those are pretty big red flags in a relationship, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. It's concerning when one partner is trying to exert that much control over another. And those patterns of behavior, unfortunately, they often continue, and they can even escalate in later relationships.
Yeah, that seems to be what happened with Joshua and Susan. They met at an LDS church event and got married in 2001, started a family. But behind this facade of a happy marriage, there were cracks. Susan even started keeping a secret journal.
Yeah, and those journal entries are so revealing. She documents all of these marital problems, and she even expresses fear for her own safety. She wrote things like, "If I die, it may not be an accident, even if it looks like one." Those words are just so chilling to read in retrospect.
Yeah. It's heartbreaking to think about what she must have been going through. And to add to the tension, Joshua was struggling financially. He had to file for bankruptcy in 2007, owing quite a bit of money. And, financial stress can put such a strain on a marriage.
Yeah. And, relationships are complicated. Money problems can definitely make things worse.
Exactly. And then you add in Joshua's father, Stephen. His obsession with Susan is well documented. He secretly recorded her. He took all these photos of her without her knowledge. He even stole her underwear. It's just a truly disturbing violation.
Yeah, this kind of obsessive behavior within a family dynamic like this is particularly unsettling. It creates this incredibly uncomfortable and unsafe environment, especially for Susan.
Yeah. It's really no wonder that they decided to move out of state, partly to get away from Stephen. But even with that distance, the problems didn't go away. So then comes December 6th, 2009. The day Susan vanished, the family went to church in the morning. A neighbor saw them in the afternoon. But after that, nothing. Susan didn't show up for work the next day. Her purse, her wallet, her cell phone were all left at home.
It's like she vanished into thin air. This is where the mystery really starts.
Exactly. And then to make things even stranger, Joshua eventually came home with the kids, claiming they had been on a late-night camping trip. But his story had problems right from the start.
Yeah, he said he took his sons camping.
Yeah.
In the middle of a blizzard. Which, come on.
Right.
Pretty unusual.
Yeah.
The police couldn't find any evidence to back up his story either. His explanations were inconsistent. It was all just very suspicious.
Very suspicious. And then the suspicion only grew. When the police searched the Powell home, they found traces of Susan's blood, life insurance policies taken out on her, and that handwritten letter where she expressed fear for her own life. It's starting to paint a very dark picture.
It definitely raises serious red flags. Now the investigation is focused on Joshua and his potential involvement in Susan's disappearance.
Right, but instead of cooperating, Joshua got a lawyer, and he just became more and more evasive. He even moved with his sons to Washington State, where, remember, his father lived. And that's where the story takes another disturbing turn.
It does. It really does. Moving to Washington, that brought a whole new dimension to the investigation.
Yeah, because now you've got authorities in Utah trying to figure out what happened to Susan. And then in Washington, there's this whole separate investigation going on, focused on Stephen Powell.
Right, and that investigation, it had uncovered some seriously disturbing stuff.
Yeah, it did. Police found thousands of images of Susan on Stephen's computer. Photos he had taken secretly, without her knowledge or consent. It confirmed that his obsession with her was way more sinister than anyone had realized.
It really makes you think about how appearances can be deceiving. This family seemed ordinary from the outside, but they were hiding some really dark secrets. And it raises the question, how much did Joshua know about his father's obsession? Could it be connected to Susan's disappearance?
It's a chilling thought, and what makes you wonder about the family dynamic? Susan's parents, Chuck and Judy Cox, they were understandably distraught and suspicious of both Joshua and his father. They were fighting so hard for custody of their grandsons.
Yeah, that custody battle became a major part of the case. Chuck and Judy believed that Joshua was responsible for Susan's disappearance, and they feared for the safety of their grandchildren.
And we can't forget about those disturbing statements the boys made. Little Charles saying his mom went camping but never came back, and Braden drawing a picture of a van with someone in the trunk. It's heartbreaking to even think about what those young boys might have witnessed or been told.
Yeah, those statements, even though they were delivered so innocently, they carried a weight that investigators couldn't ignore, and they added another layer of urgency to the custody battle, because there were serious concerns for those children's well-being.
Right, and the judge eventually granted temporary custody to the Coxes, ordering Joshua to move out of his father's house if he wanted to regain custody. But it turned out Joshua wasn't being truthful.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he never actually moved out. It was later discovered that he was manipulating the system, making everyone think he was complying with the court order, but the whole time he was still living with his father.
So he was basically playing a game, trying to maintain control.
Ah.
Exactly. That's a pattern you see a lot in cases like this. This belief that they can outsmart the authorities.
It's like they think they can control the narrative.
Yeah, and it's a dangerous combination. Arrogance and desperation often leads to tragic consequences.
And meanwhile, the search for Susan continued. There were extensive searches of the Utah desert. They even investigated a potential grave site near Topaz Mountain, but they never found anything concrete.
It must have been just agonizing for Susan's family, all that not knowing, the constant wondering. It's an unimaginable burden.
Absolutely. And then Joshua's sister, Jennifer Graves, she publicly stated that she believed her brother was responsible for Susan's disappearance. That must have been a really tough decision for her, to speak out against her own family.
It was a brave thing to do. She chose truth over loyalty, and she sided with Susan's family in their search for justice. It really says a lot about her character.
It does, but sadly, the truth in this case, it came out in the most horrific way imaginable. On February 5th, 2012, a social worker brought Charles and Braden to Joshua's home for a supervised visit. Minutes later, the house exploded in a massive fireball.
Oh my God. That's awful.
It was. Joshua and his 2 young sons died in the explosion.
That's just a senseless tragedy.
It was, and the investigation determined that it was a premeditated double murder-suicide. Joshua had spread gasoline all through the house, he attacked his sons with a hatchet, and then he ignited the whole thing. He even sent these chilling farewell emails to family and friends just minutes before the explosion.
Wow, it sounds like a final act of control. A twisted attempt to deny everyone closure, even his own children.
It was.
It's just a reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked rage and desperation.
In the aftermath, everyone was trying to understand what led Joshua to do this. Was it guilt and deception? Was he trying to protect his father? Or was it something even darker?
Those are questions we may never have answers to. But we do know one thing. The evidence points to a pattern of manipulation, control, and just a complete disregard for human life.
And remember that old computer, the one with what authorities called incestuous cartoon porn on it? Well, after the murders. It was determined that those files actually belonged to Susan. They were viewed by the computer's previous owners. So Joshua was cleared of that particular accusation.
Oh, wow. So that was a misunderstanding then.
Yeah, it was. Kind of a strange twist in a case that already had plenty of them.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it didn't really change the overall perception of Joshua as a manipulative and dangerous person.
Right.
And then there's the question of his brother Michael. You know that car he sold to the junkyard shortly after Susan disappeared? The one where a cadaver dog indicated human remains had been in the trunk?
Oh, yeah. Whatever happened with that?
Well, Michael's involvement has always been a source of speculation. Did he help dispose of Susan's body? Was he pressured by his brother or his father? We may never know for sure. Because tragically, a year after the murders, Michael took his own life. He jumped from a parking garage in Minneapolis.
Wow.
And his suicide fueled even more speculation about his potential role in Susan's disappearance.
It's a sad reminder of how tragedy can ripple outward. This case didn't just impact Susan and her children, it impacted an entire family, leaving behind so much pain and loss. and all these unanswered questions.
And through it all, Susan's remains have never been found. It's like she vanished into thin air, leaving behind only heartbreak and mystery.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine the pain Susan's family has been through all these years without any answers, without even being able to lay their daughter to rest.
It's unimaginable.
The not knowing, the constant wondering, it can be all-consuming.
Yeah.
Susan's parents, Chuck and Judy Cox, they've shown such incredible strength and resilience.
They have.
They've never given up hope of finding their daughter.
And they've been so active in the search for Susan, haven't they?
Oh, absolutely. They've really kept Susan's case in the public eye. They've organized searches, and they've pushed for changes in the law to help other families of missing persons. They even petitioned to have Susan declared legally dead in 2013.
Wow. That must have been a bittersweet victory for them. You know, legally, it gave them some closure. But it's also a painful acknowledgement that Susan is most likely gone.
Yeah, it was a complicated decision, full of emotion. But it allowed them to move forward with some legal matters and continue their advocacy work.
And the search for her remains continues to this day. There have been some promising leads over the years, haven't there?
Yeah, there have. In recent years, there have been some organized searches, including one led by Dave Sparks. They used advanced technology to explore areas where Susan's remains might be.
Right, that was that cave exploration we talked about. They found some bones and clothing. It seemed promising at first, but the DNA testing ruled them out.
Exactly. It was such a roller coaster of emotions for everyone involved, that initial hope. And then the crushing disappointment when the DNA results came back.
It's just devastating. But it does show that people are still invested in finding Susan, even after all this time.
It really does. It speaks to the power of hope and that basic human need for closure. And there's still some unanswered questions, some intriguing parts of the puzzle that haven't been fully explored yet.
Yeah, like those pants that were found, the ones that tested positive for male DNA.
Oh, right, those pants. Yeah. They were found in a pretty remote area, and that area had already been searched before. The fact that the pants had male DNA, but not Susan's, well, it raises a lot of questions.
It does. Could they be connected to Susan's disappearance? Or is it just a coincidence?
It's tough to say for sure. It's possible they belong to someone totally unrelated to the case. But it's also possible that they could be a new lead. Maybe they could point investigators to a different area or a different person of interest.
It's a good reminder that even in a case like this, as complex as it is, and as dead-ended as it seems, there's always a chance of new discoveries.
Yeah, you never know what might turn up.
So where does that leave us? We've gone through all the twists and turns of this case, the complicated family dynamics, the tragic loss of life, and this ongoing search for answers. It's a story that really makes you think.
It is. It makes you ask some really hard questions.
Yeah.
About human nature, about the nature of evil, about the systems that are supposed to protect us. It shows how darkness can hide in the most unexpected places, even in families that seem ordinary.
It also leaves us with so many unanswered questions. Will Susan's remains ever be found? Will her family ever get the closure they deserve? And what can we learn from this tragedy to prevent something like this from happening again?
Those are important questions, ones we need to keep asking ourselves.
Absolutely.
We need to be more aware of the signs of domestic abuse, the dangers of obsession, and how important really intervention is.
Yeah, I think that's a crucial takeaway from all of this. So for me, what stands out the most from this whole deep dive is the incredible strength and resilience of Susan's family, their determination to find her, to seek justice, to keep her memory alive. It's truly inspiring. It reminds us that even in the face of unimaginable tragedy, hope and love can still persevere.
I agree.
And to our listener, who provided all of the source material for us, I hope this deep dive has given you some new insights. This case, with all its twists and turns and unanswered questions, it really makes you think about the fragility of life, the importance of family, and that enduring power of hope. So thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the disappearance of Susan Powell. We'll be back soon with another exploration of a fascinating topic. But until then, keep those minds curious and those hearts open.